So do you ever wonder why some vintage comic books and collectibles used to be worth more than your rent? Now they're just sitting in someone's garage collecting dust? Well, we're about to dive in and take a look at what's happened to these collectibles over the last 10, 20 years. So strap in, grab your popcorn, and let's begin. So let's start back in the golden age. Superman, Batman, Captain America. These weren't just nerdy hobbies. This was the original crypto, with some comic books that you bought for maybe 5 cents, couple dollars, selling for thousands of dollars. People quickly realized this wasn't just nostalgia, this was an investment. So they started gathering up as many comic books from their past as they could and stockpiling them. And you know what happens when people start to collect things like this, or better known as hoarding? A whole industry popped up around comic book collecting. But here's the problem. Markets built on nostalgia and emotion, they never last. They're only around for as long as the people who love them are around for. So eventually, with that in mind, things are gonna have to shift. And spoiler alert, this crash didn't come from bad stories, it came from us. So the 90s brought madness for comic book collecting, with publishers printing millions of issues, expecting collectors to just gobble them up. As they'd seen in previous years, people were hoarding these comic books, stockpiling them in hopes that they would keep growing in value. So these publishers thought, well, if we just keep printing out millions of issues, people are gonna keep buying them, right? Because the price only goes up. Well, that's where they're wrong. This crashed the markets, because nothing that's ever printed a million times is ever gonna be very rare. Now, this is looking at the comic book market as a whole from the outside. This isn't looking at specific comics, which are still scarce and hold their value. But if you look at the comic book market, there's not many comics that have actually continued to steadily go up. Even the scarce ones have hit their peak and started to head back down. Whether this was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or right now, it depends on the comic and the issue. So this is what people call a parabolic curve, as prices skyrocket up with hype and FOMO, then hit their peak and begin to head back down as people realize they're not as scarce as they thought, and there's not as much money in the market to be made for everybody else. Collectors call this one of the most iconic comics to ever be collected. It's going to be disputed by somebody, but this comic has dropped over 37.5%. And it's not just Spider-Man. Hulk number 181, ASM number 300, they've all hit their peak and the floor is still falling. Like I said, there's some comics that are going to hold their value due to the sheer scarcity and just rarity of the comic. But that's not going to protect the entire market. As people just no longer start to care about these comics, their value is going to keep falling. Now you got to ask yourself, the young people that you may know, or even as a young person yourself, do you care about comics? The answer's probably not. So you got to think, how many other people still care about comics, and are they able to keep driving that value by themselves? This is why we've seen things like Pokemon continue to rise up in value, as they've built up their player base with new young people all the time, continuing to have old and young fans that are going to keep the market pushing. So what's going on? Why do we keep shifting interests and finding a new thing to collect all the time? Well, it's not the market, it's us as people.
What?
Our interests shift all the time, especially in this new age where our focus is constantly being shifted to a new video every 5 seconds or a new topic on Twitter. Our attention spans are getting lower and lower. So this is going to have a large effect on things that don't hold your attention span as long, like physical media or even baseball cards, etc. Things have shifted from the past, from collectibles and art to experience, mobility, and digital culture. Nobody's really interested in sleeves of plastic hoarding up their closet anymore. They more care about what sort of cool NFT they can show you on their phone or their trip to Bali.
Wow.
Who's to say what's right or wrong? That's up to you to decide. It's your life after all. So if you don't feel like collecting and owning these pieces of art, then it doesn't matter, right? That would have served you no value in your life anyways. So you use your money how you want to use it. But you have to be able to examine that if you are a collector or somebody who purchases these things as an investment. Times are changing, and people no longer feel like putting their hard-earned money into collectibles, art, things that they don't feel they're getting the full value out of. People would much rather go spend $100, $200 on a fancy dinner and night out instead of, a comic book that might appreciate in value. So when people who built the value system stop caring, that value system no longer exists. It's the same with those ceramic dolls your grandparents collect, stamps, or even antiques. A lot of these things held their value incredibly, even up until 2010, 2015. But as our culture as a whole changes on this world, those things start to depreciate. People no longer care about the nice antique chair or the stamp collection that they have. It's, they got a cool chair from IKEA and they just bought stamps from the post office. They don't care. They've got to put gas in their Tesla still, and they need to get to work and drink the matcha. How are they gonna have money for that if they just bought nice antiques? Interest dies and demand dries up, and suddenly those nice investments aren't looking so hot. Things that you would have paid $200, $300 for in a beautiful antique shop are now ending up in the landfill. So you're probably thinking, well, if collectibles aren't future-proof, then what is? Because I'm not sinking my money into anything else until I can figure that out.
No.
If you're going to put your hard-earned money into anything, you've got to be smart about that and make sure that it's future-proofed if you plan to keep your money in there for a long time. With the rapidly changing culture and the world that we live in now, it's kind of hard to tell what's going to be future-proofed. So let's take a look at a couple examples that I think are going to hold up really well in the next couple of years. A couple of years being 10, 20, 30, who knows? Things are moving too fast to even worry about right now. If you do really like comics or collectibles, there's still some survivors. You just gotta go make sure you do your research diligently. Cultural favorites or extremely rare editions still have held some value and may still continue to go up. The value today in these collectible spaces is more so built on community than it is the actual scarcity of the item. So make sure there's a large community backing whatever you decide to buy. Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, these are two great examples of communities that continue to grow and get bigger all the time. Although it's good to have a large community, you want to make sure that community is actually expanding consistently. As our world keeps growing and getting bigger all the time, if your community isn't as well. So next time somebody says, oh man, this is going to be worth so much money in 20 years, ask yourself, is anybody even going to care? Because if nobody cares, there's no value either. And if you do think they're going to care, make sure you hold on to it. Having foresight like that could make you lots of money. Say you held Bitcoin or Pokemon back in 2015. You would have made tons of money. So if you really think deep down in your gut, it's going to be big. Trust it. Now, a lot of you may have probably realized this video wasn't just about comic books. It's about our value culture as a whole. You got to be diligent and make sure to watch where people's attention is going for the future. That's where you make the most money. Comic books, collectibles, antiques, they didn't fail us. We just moved on. We found something new. And maybe that's what it's about. Sometimes you can't always be on the same thing forever. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're able to learn something from it as well. Maybe it shifted your perspective on investing just a little bit, or you're looking at the comic books in your room thinking, maybe I need to diversify. Either way, I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Oh my god, I haven't seen these in years. They're probably worth so much money now. I gotta check eBay. Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. They were worth nothing.